Good morning, everybody. Today is the third day of the month of Adar. We are already in this happy, joyous month of Adar, and today is I have no idea, was it 21st or something? 22nd of February. It's the 22nd of February. Where did this year go? And we are on page 26 in the book called The Art of Giving. And we actually finished on page 28, but we're going back just to the final paragraph on page 26, just to get us back in the mood, in the concept, in the idea. We began the essay with him defining what does it mean that when the Talmud talks about the mitzvah of tzedakah, it suggests that every penny, every coin one gives to tzedakah, it adds up to a large amount. Kol pruta upruta mitztarefet lecheshbon gadol. Every single coin is combined to become a big amount. And he asked the question, what do you mean combined? When you give the coin, you have fulfilled the mitzvah of tzedakah. Combined to what? To a bigger amount of tzedakah? To the bigger amount? Is the bigger amount what counts? And he brings from the Rambam and so on. And so he says you have to say then that despite the fact that when you give a coin, even a small amount, one fulfills the commandment to give tzedakah, and that's already a mitzvah in and of itself. Nevertheless, a bigger amount also counts for something. A larger amount counts for something. But then he pushes that off. He says that from various sources, and this is where we are now, from various sources, it would seem that giving a smaller amount, it more frequently is more appropriate than giving a larger one sum amount. So if you had $10,000 to give to Chabad of Peachtree City, for example, Amen, then each time, instead of giving you 10,000, it would seem it would be more appropriate to give whatever it is throughout the year. You're only giving 10,000 in the year, and so throughout the year, every day give whatever is $175, or however the amount goes to 365 days. Every day you're going to give a certain amount till you get to your 10,000. That would seem more fulfilling of the mitzvah. That's not the conclusion, though. The conclusion, don't go home with that, though. The conclusion is it's one thing about how you need to give. It's another thing about how the recipient needs to receive it. If it's a school, they would probably prefer the 175 a day rather than the 10,000 and one lump sum, because they know they can rely on that every single day. They have different expenses all. But if it's as a fundraiser for a building and you need the money now, not the end of the year, then the 10,000 doesn't go very far. It's hard to rely on that when you're trying to give your architect and your construction manager, and give them some money here. So and move the building. So it does depend. It's not so simple that to give the more frequent and less amount is always the right thing to do. We'll when we get through this whole thing, we'll figure this out. So we're going to look at the Rambam. He had brought from the Maimonides, who says that it's good to give every single day because the Mishnah says, the Talmud says that everything follows according to how much you do, not how big amount you do. It's how frequently you're doing it. Then he brought from the Bar Tanura, Rabbi Avadia, who lived in a city called Bar Tanura. You heard of Bar Tanura wine? Well, Bar Tanura is a city in Italy. And they named the wine there after the city. But in Jewish circles, anybody who's ever studied the Mishnah, which is the basis of the Talmud, will always know that I studied it together with the commentary of, we just call him the Bartanura. It's like saying the Peachtree City. It is a name of a city. If you tell a kid studying in school that the Bartanura is the name of a city, they say, what are you talking about? It's the name of a man who I read his commentary all the time. He helps it. That's how it just is. That's sometimes you have people known by the acronym of their name, like Rambam and Rashi. Sometimes you have people known by another title, like Moshe, Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher, the Rebbe, and others you have known by their city, by their place. The what?
Rabbi Peachtree City.
Oh, just plain Peach, old Peachtree City. When people say, so where are you? Like, where do you live now? And I say, a place called Peachtree City. It's so unusual. People ask me, people commented to me just recently when I was in New York. I said, oh, that sounds so, interesting. It must be a very interesting place. I said, I'm working on it. And usually I say, how are things in Peachtree City? I say, they're peachy. What else are you supposed to say?
That's right.
But that gives you enough, ice-breaking. What, Peachtree City? What do you mean? Like a peach tree? Are there any peaches down there? I say, well, depends on how do you define a peach? Anyway. So the Bar Tanura, or the Rabbi Avadia from the city of Bar Tanura. So the Bar Tanura, we have copies over here, so we're good with that. I think we want to turn on the. Sure.
Right down.
So the Bar Tanura, in his commentary, writes as follows. We're at the bottom of page 26, right on the last 3 lines. Indeed, actually, this is a quote from the first Rebbe of Chabad, who is saying the same thing, not the Bar Tanura. Indeed, in the service of charity, we have also found and noted a particularly great and incomparable, wondrous virtue. Incomparable, wondrous virtue. You don't find this anywhere else. When the act of charity is performed numerous times, and whoever does so frequently is praiseworthy, that's what the Rebbe is writing, rather than at one time and all at once, even when the total sum is the same, as Rambam of blessed memory wrote in his commentary on the Mishnah taught by our sages of blessed memory, everything is according to the preponderance of good deeds. In other words, how many good deeds you do. So it's there's nothing like it, because usually you say, well, you got to have your 4 species. Get the best you have. You don't buy 5 medium ones. Buy the best. Matzah, buy the best. The wine, buy the best. If you want to tefillin, buy the best tefillin. If you want to spend the amount and to find that more beautiful and to make it more whatever, do it right away. Tzedakah, he says no. Do it slowly, bit by bit. That's the quality of the mitzvah. Now, continues the Rebbe. Apart from the underlying reason for this, that Rambam of blessed memory clearly explained, which is, quote, in order to refine the soul by means of the multiplicity of action. In other words, because a person is engaged every single day in giving, rather than saying, okay, let me give my donations once a year, and it's off my head, I don't have to do it anymore. There are certain mitzvahs that the Jewish custom and law would prefer for us to sort of break it over time, only so that we shouldn't be able to get it out of our minds, just sit in our heads all day. So, for example, the followers of Chabad, the adherents and the ones who are very, the Chabad, there's a certain regimen that a person has to follow of study every single day. Every day you've got to cover a certain amount, which is, nobody says you have to, like you must, but that's the requirement. If you want to be a follower, a chassid, you got to do these things, and they have to do with learning law and learning some Hasidic philosophy every day, the Torah every day, the Torah portion, saying some Tehillim, some Psalms. There's certain things we sort of need to do every day, have to do. Now, some people like to sit in the morning. You finish off your prayers. Prayers are, they sit on your head every single morning, so you got to get them done. It takes between, half hour to an hour every day. And then they'll sit down, spend the extra half hour, and knock the whole thing off. All right, now I'm free for the day. So the Rebbe's of Chabad suggested that instead of doing that, set aside time a different part of the day, so it shouldn't be out of your mind. So your mind should always think, I didn't finish the thing, so now I've got to open up another book. I've got to spend more time designated for my holy activities rather than my whatever activities. And so you take along with you your phone today, so you have it all these books are in the phone. I've got my Chumash in the phone, I got my Tehillim in the phone, I got my Tanya, and I got my Rambam, and I got them all in here. But I also have, I used to schlep around my books. My books look quite used as a result of all of this in my own personal private library because I used them a lot, traveled with them. Today, making photocopies is not that expensive, or you have booklets that are published. You spend $1 or $2 a week, 100 or 200 pages. In it, you will have approximately 50 different subjects that you can learn from, including the daily regimen and the weekly regimens and whatever it is in there. And so you take it with you. So now you can put it in your pocket kind of thing. It's a little booklet. You can take it with you in the car. You can take it with you on I was taking with me on the boat in Eilat 3 weeks ago. I was on the on the Red Sea, on the day that the Torah says the Red Sea split. How did I know it? Because I opened up the book and I said, hey, wait a minute, it's right here. And I was saying yesterday, I was on the glass boat in Eilat. You have a boat that has a glass bottom to it, and you can see all the coral, which is the jellyfish and all that stuff. It's amazing. You see the ground, which is what the Jewish people saw when they walked across the bare, dry land of the Red Sea. I wasn't in that section. I was in the section closer to Israel. They weren't as close to Israel as I was, but still, it was an unbelievable thrill. Why? Because I had that book with me and I was studying on the boat. I was studying for a few minutes. It wasn't that I was, doing my studies. I was on the boat, for crying out loud. I was with my daughter, and some other people came over. In Israel, you never have more than 5 minutes, because then somebody comes over and starts talking to you about, hey, you see that place over there, and all of a sudden it's a half-hour conversation, and you know somebody in Texas and somebody in Jerusalem and Jewish geography, and all of a sudden it's your best friend. And then I went downstairs, and the driver, this is all outside of the realm over here, but the driver of the boat starts talking to me. I say, wait a minute, that's an accent. He says, yeah, I'm from Cape Town. I said, wait a minute. I spent 2 years in South Africa, you see. Anyway, so you want to have for yourself something that sits on your head rather than free. So when you have a responsibility sitting at your desk, and you have 4 tasks to complete that day. You got 2 phone calls, very important phone calls to make. You got a letter to write, and you have a discussion that you have to have with one of your workers about whatever. And so it's 9:30 in the morning, and you get on the phone. Hi, hello, this is John. I want to reach out to you. I've got I'm going to discuss with you. Or you say, hey, John, how you doing? Long time no speak. Let's get this thing done. And you make your 2 phone calls, and then immediately you're going to call your person, and you're going to get the 4 things done. Now, the reason why you're doing that is because, first of all, you may have other things to do in the day, maybe not. You may have a golf game to go to. Secondly, things come up during the day. That's why you're sitting in the office. All kinds of things. Now, if you haven't finished your tasks, then there are other things that may step in the way, and then all of a sudden, you haven't done what you needed to do, and you'll get distracted by the other things that came on that you didn't plan, and that may be important, but they weren't important at the beginning of your day. So you want to get your thing off your head to clear your mind. You don't want to have to deal with this anymore. But with Torah and with some of the mitzvahs, you want to be able to have it sit on your head, because those are good things to have on your head. You're clearing your mind from what? Now I don't have any more duties to study. I don't have any more responsibilities to God. Now I've cleared my schedule, so now I can not think about God. Of course, it's not, the person's not saying that, but that's really the outcome. All right, I've done. I'm finished. It's out of my way. That's over. That's not necessarily the recommendation, the recommended way of doing things when you're talking about spirituality. And it's the same thing with the mitzvah of tzedakah, unlike other mitzvahs. Other mitzvahs, in the morning, do your prayers. Before you do anything else, do them. And when you've done your prayers, you're now able to focus on some other things. In tzedakah, he wants you to maintain that sense of duty and responsibility so that you should be able to think about constantly giving tzedakah. What does that do? And this is what he said over here. In order to refine the soul, line 3 of the second paragraph, in order to refine the soul by means of the multiplicity of action, because I need to keep on doing it. An explicit verse in Scripture states, this is the Rebbe now continuing on that idea, that the effect of tzedakah is for life. This means that the effect and mystical consequence of tzedakah is to elicit and draw down supernal life from the fountainhead of life, the blessed Ein Sof. Ein Sof would mean the infinite, the unending godliness that continues. We have within ourselves, every single human being has within him or herself some kind of soul that gives us life. And so do all the creatures out there. Everyone has a soul of life. That is a given. We've got something from God that keeps us going. But there is another element of energy which is connected to the infinite level of life, which is not a given. That's where we want to tap into by doing good deeds. All good deeds that we do draw down energy to us. We call it the reward. It's the energy that comes, the godly energy that comes to us. It's the blessing that comes to us every single time we do something positive, something good, something the Torah says. Every time you come to shul, every time you say Shema, every time you put on film, every time you have a mezuzah, keep kosher, all of that stuff keeps on keeping on. And that connects us to a higher, deeper, more mystical blessing of God. It may remain mystical. We may not be able to see the outcome, the effects, the results of this tapping into this energy. We may not be able to feel it, but it's there. That's part of the 13 fundamental principles of faith. In Judaism is that there is a system that we do good and we get rewarded. And if we do no good, we got to clean that stuff up. So that's one of the principles of faith. Without that, we wouldn't be motivated to do anything. Why should we? Why should we? Just because God asked? No, when God says, I want you to do it, he continues and he says, and when you do that, I will give you. He makes it as a condition. Where will he give? Okay, that's not as clear as, but it's getting there somewhere. So, tzedakah is for life, meaning that we get a connection to the deeper element of life, to the more mystical element of life when a person does tzedakah. The tzedakah gives us a great, and he explained this in the introduction, and he'll go through this as well, because tzedakah is and I mentioned this yesterday when we were talking about the Torah portion, that when the person's earnings reflects a person's, not just blood, sweat, and tears, but also a person's entire essence. Our whole focus is on our career. We put everything into our career. Of course, there are up times and more intense times, but when the more intense times are there, we are focused and fully there with all our faculties. Physical, emotional, spiritual, all there. And that's how we earn money. So the money represents not just our efforts, but our essence. And when we give that away, God says, oh, wait a minute, now you're giving away something of yours that's like representative of you. Not only that, with this money, you can buy things that will feed you, that will give you life. You're giving that life to someone else or to some other institution. There is no mitzvah like that. And that's why God makes this as the most important mitzvah, because you get back life. God says, you will not lose. You don't lose anything by giving tzedakah. You give tzedakah, I replenish that. So when it says that tzedakah is for eternal life, means that it connects us with the highest and most deepest element, mystical elements, not just God's going to replenish you. This is much more. I told the story on Yom Kippur. I'm sure you remember it for 5 months ago. But and I mentioned it a couple of times throughout the year, but this is a very important story about the guy who came up to heaven and he wasn't doing very well up there. And then finally they found one act of selfless giving which erased the entire business. The whole lifetime of whatever piles he had was pushed off because of this one act of complete total selflessness, put himself in danger, put his life on the line for other people. My point then was, funny that I remember this, my point then was that we never know what our parents, some people have some issues with parents, and we never know what where they are and what good deeds they did. And we need to remember them for the good things that our memory, we're talking about yesterday. Okay, so let's get back into what he's saying over here. And I'm going to move back halfway into the second paragraph. We'll repeat this again. This means that the effect and the mystical consequence of tzedakah. By the way, we have copies on the table over here. Plenty more copies for anybody who wants. On page 28. This means that the effect and mystical consequence of tzedakah is to elicit and draw down supernal life from the fountainhead of life, the blessed Ein Sof. Ein Sof, let's look at number 17, literally infinite or endless, meaning the most absolute infinite force of God, totally beyond description, knowledge, and comprehension, completely beyond any boundaries, the essence of God himself. That's what tzedakah connects us to. That God. Like a kid asked me on this recent trip, he said, but what if I don't believe in that Torah or that God? So I said, that Torah and that God that you don't believe in, I don't believe in either. I said, it's not like you don't believe in it. You don't even know it. You're ignorant of it. I don't blame you for thinking that way. You don't know. If you don't know it, I said, what if you came to me with a mathematical question that I never studied? What if I told you I don't believe in that stuff? He said, what are you talking about? You don't even know anything about it. What if you ask me a question about Van Gogh's painting? I don't know anything about his paintings. It doesn't interest me in the slightest bit. But what if instead of me answering to you, I don't know anything, I said to you, what, Van Gogh? I don't believe in that guy. I don't believe he even painted those paintings. They just, somebody else came on and painted it. The guy says, well, are you a aficionado? No, I don't know anything about Van Gogh. So how do you say such a thing? Well, it's my opinion, my belief. See, the belief that you have in whatever they told you about Torah is not the belief that I have either. That part of Torah I don't believe in anyway. So the Torah, if you want to know about Torah, I'll be able to teach you, or your rabbi should be able to teach you when you get back to the United States. And anytime you want, I'll be happy to help you out and share it with you. So when people say I don't believe in God, I usually say to them, I don't believe in that God either. I answer that same question. I said, what do you know about God not to believe in him? Well, why does he do this? Oh, that's a good question. But again, what do you know about God? If you don't know anything about God, then why don't you first study about him and then decide that you don't believe in him? And if you want to start, here, I can give you some books. We can do whatever it is. I spoke with a kid on Saturday night in Israel, our last Saturday night there. And he's from Atlanta, and I know him, his parents, I know him very well. So I met with him. I tried to meet with him different times. I finally met with him on Saturday. We had 2 hours on this pedestrian mall to buy jewelry and food, basically, or Judaica and food. And I had to help out my group, because I don't want them to be, as the term I used to them was, you're going to get shafted if you're going to just rely on this. So buying a mezuzah, they'll sell you anything down there. Whatever they have in their thing, they'll try to sell it to you. And don't buy something that's invalid, it's illegitimate. So I was helping them out. Anyway, this kid started talking, and he started saying, about God. He was asking these questions. This is a kid who was observant and all that. So I'll be honest with you, I don't believe in God. I said, which part of God don't you believe in? I said, well, anyway, after it took me about 45 minutes to get into his head. And when I finally asked him the valid questions, and I got him this, he said, I didn't even think of that. I said, not believing in something can only happen after you believe in it. And then you will prove that it doesn't happen. How do you not believe in something? Just because what? Oh, I don't believe Barack Obama says, it means what he says in 2007. How do you know that? In 2015? Oh, I know it. Because I've been listening to him, I'm following him. I don't think he's saying legitimate things. So I don't believe in it. All right, that's good. You give the person a chance, and then that's politics. Or I don't believe that Peachtree City is the best place in the world. Why that? Well, because I know of another place that's better. What do you know about Peachtree City? Well, I read that. Oh, you read? Okay, that's good. What do you know about Peachtree City? Oh, and you know what somebody wrote? Good. But you didn't study it, you didn't come, you didn't meet the people, you didn't see the place. How could you have a belief in Peachtree City not to believe in it? And it's the same thing with all kinds of things. People say, I don't. It's my opinion. What based on what? It's my Van Gogh opinion. What opinion do you have? What do I know about Van Gogh? Go ahead.
My teacher was talking about that, and he said, you can't say, this pizza shop is the best pizza shop in the world because I've never been to all the pizza shops.
I have, and I can, no. Regarding kosher Chinese, though, the one that's in Atlanta is. We can say because I've been to all 18 of them. No.
Which one's the best?
The one in Atlanta so far is the best I've ever.
What's the name?
It's called Chai Peking. It's in the Kroger in Toco Hills.
Okay.
That place is, it's really, it's the most tasty Chinese food I've ever had. And I'm not a very big Chinese. I don't care what it is, but this happens to taste very good. You've ever tasted, right? So this little footnote gives us a little glimpse into when people say, I don't believe in God, what God are you talking about? So this is the one that is beyond description, knowledge, and comprehension, completely beyond any boundaries. What do you know about that God? Because that's the ultimate God that we're talking about. And then all of the questions that we may have, well, it's beyond comprehension. You don't know how this God is. It's like there was a discussion in the early founding of Hasidism. And there was a particularly difficult period for the Jewish people, a bad pogrom or something. And the rabbis, these are great, great sages, sat down, and each one said, if I was God, I would do away with poverty, I would do away with this, I'd do away with that. And the first Rebbe of Chabad, who was part of this discussion, said, if I was God, I would do exactly the way it's happening now. Wow. Because God is doing it. You can have questions of why. That's okay. How? That's okay. But if he's God, and God means a God, a real God, then if you understood him, you would also be along with him. If God made sense to you, then what kind of God is that? We can be angry at God, it's okay. Moses has been angry at God and all the way down. We've always, we've had things that, come on. But ultimately, things happen because They're supposed to happen this way. And that's the kind of God that he's talking about over here. And that's where tzedakah takes us, to a level of godliness that is beyond. And that's a great blessing. To be connected to that kind of godliness is a blessing that we can only achieve through our efforts and achievements on this world. And tzedakah is the ultimate way of getting in touch with that type of energy. Okay? To the blessed Ein Sof, to the land of life. That's, again, a euphemism, the land of ultimate life. Life not like ending life, a life that doesn't have eternity, but to the ultimate land of life, meaning godliness, who exists forever. I.e., or for another euphemism in Kabbalistic terms, to Malchut of Atzilut. Atzilut, if you remember from our previous book, is the highest of the four worlds. Malchut is the lowest level of the highest world. So it's, in other words, the lowest level of the highest world is the one that is the gateway to the next world. So that one receives from the previous elements and gives to the next elements. So Malchut, meaning to receive and to give, of Atzilut, of the highest level, which is the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah is a term used for the element of God that comes into this world, if you're lucky enough to connect to it. An element of godliness that is infinite, yet is designed to come into this world in the right place. So in the Holy of Holies, for example, that's what we call the Shekhinah came down there. And that's the ultimate of holiness in this world, the ultimate place of godliness. And every person, every individual can create a Shekhinah, a Holy of Holies within them. Because when the Torah says, create for me a sanctuary, in yesterday's Torah portion, he says, create for me a sanctuary and I will dwell in them. He doesn't say create for me sanctuaries and I will dwell in them. He doesn't say create for me a sanctuary and I will dwell in it, as he says in the book of Kings. But in yesterday's portion, it says create for me a sanctuary and I will dwell in them. So our sages interpret that to mean in a sanctuary within your heart, and I will dwell in every single one of them. The word dwell is the word Shekhinah, where God not just is there, but he's dwelling there. He's comfortable. You've made for him a place. You've created for him a holy of holies within yourself. So this is the Shekhinah that gives us strength, of which it is said, and you animate them all. That means you give life to them all. Now let's look at footnote 18 and 19. Well, not 19, well, 18. In Kabbalah and Chassidus, Malchut of Atzilus is associated with the Shekhinah, or the divine presence. Malchus, the lowest level of the highest world, is where God sort of dwells there. To explain, of the four supernal worlds, Atzilut is the loftiest, that we had discussed in our previous book at length. It is a godly world. That means this is quite a contradiction, because if it's godly, then it shouldn't be a world. When you use the term world means it starts somewhere and it ends somewhere else. When you say godly, you're saying infinite. So this combination of infinity together with finite, world and God that comes together, that means the Shekhinah, which is the term for the infinite level of God, yet the word Shekhinah means to dwell. That the divine level of God is designed to dwell, to actually be in this world. We talked about this at length yesterday, about the ark. The ark did not take up any place in the Holy of Holies. Now wait a minute, when you put the ark down, it went measured from here to here, a certain amount, right? From beginning to end. Yeah, but when you measured the wall, from the wall to the ark, and from the ark back to the other wall, it had too much space. The measurement was too big. So the ark took up space. Let's say the room was 10 cubits long, and the ark was 5 cubits. So from one end of the ark to the wall would have been 2.5 cubits, and from the other end would have been 2.5, and the ark takes up 5. So 2.5 and 2.5 is 5. The ark takes up 5. You've used up that space of 10 cubits. But that's not what happened in the Holy of Holies. When they measured the ark, it indeed took up 5 cubits. But when they measured from the wall of the ark to the wall of the place, and from the wall of the ark to the wall of the room, it was 5 cubits on each side. In the words of our sages, Nimna Hanimnos. He did what the impossible together with the possible. It's impossible to even imagine that. How do you take up space and yet not take up space? And that's the trick that God played in the Holy of Holies. And the reason why he did that, as explained in Hasidic teaching, is because to be God, that means not to occupy space. Well, he's God, shouldn't be occupying space. To be a world and to occupy space, well, that's what world does. World means space. But when you combine the two, only God can do that. Only the one who created space can say, I choose when to take up space and when not to take up space, and it's all in the same. And he does this in the Holy of Holies, in his house, in where his Shekhinah is, the divine presence is present in this world, the holiest place in this world. So you can have a combination of God and world in the same instance. And every single Jew who came for the pilgrimage festival on Passover, on Shavuos, and then on Sukkot again, had the opportunity to see this. Because the Torah says, when you come to me, to see me. And therefore they opened up all the doors, all the curtains, and every person was able to file past. You couldn't walk in there, but you could see it from a distance of 20 or 30 feet. And you saw the ark. They were able to see the cherubs. And sometimes the cherubs were facing one another, and sometimes they weren't. This is God's house. When they weren't facing, they knew that they had some things to fix up. So, it is a godly world, means that this is the ultimate combination of a world and a God in the same place. In Atzilut, which is the loftiest, the highest of the 4 worlds, there is no feeling of self or being. Whatever's in there, whatever soul may be in there, whatever angels may be in there, they have absolutely no necessary knowledge or feeling that they exist. Because you're in the ultimate, you're basking in the ultimate light of God. In the previous book, we discussed this as the example of the shine of the rays of the sun in the sun. So the sun produces a ray. The light produces a ray. That means that within the light there is an opportunity for the ray to come out. So the ray in the sun, well, there is no ray in the sun because it's the light itself. It's the essence of the light. So if you're in the essence of the sun, you don't have the ray. You have the essence. There's no need for the ray. The ray is only an expansion, an extension from the sun. Similarly, when a created being, is in the level where there is godliness in its highest form, then they don't feel the ray. They don't feel themselves. They feel, which is an extension of God, they feel the God. So there's no feeling of self, of a being. I'm here. It's no I. There's God. Even in the lower levels, there's that type of feeling. Over here is the only world where you don't see God, so you feel like you exist. And not necessarily is that in a negative way. If you don't feel like you exist, then you can't function. You can't eat if you don't feel hungry. And you can't be happy if you don't feel things that are happy, or you can't be sad if you don't feel things that are sad. And people who don't feel themselves end up being depressed because they don't feel themselves. They feel the sadness. They lose themselves in the sadness, or into the bottle, or into the drug. And then they want to not exist anymore. That's what people who don't feel themselves. So physically, we need to feel ourselves. That's the only way we can function. Except that we take ourselves very seriously in this world. So we go too far. That's where the problems start. Who are you to tell me? Because I'm me. You see. So in the highest world, there is the least amount of feeling of oneself. And we're not talking about physical people over here. We're talking about angels and souls. And the angels, you You don't hear anything. From the other worlds, you hear what the angels say, and the prophets describe that the angels say, Kadosh, 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 holy, 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 they make noise, and that's because they're feeling themselves a little bit more, and they're getting very emotional. From whatever happens in the highest world, you don't hear a thing. No prophet can tell you what's happened. There's no screaming. They're just completely in awe. They're lost in the basking of God. They don't want to say one word. I might miss something. It's not about me. There's no feeling of self-being, just an awareness of something higher, something beyond, in other words, godliness. Atzilut is therefore not considered to be a created world, but rather an emanated world. Created means that there's some effort to make something new. Emanated means it's just an extension. It's just an expression. That the word Atzilut means emanated, the world of emanation. It is in Atzilut, though, that God's attributes, known as the 10 Sephirot, the 10 levels in each world, are first manifest. That means there is limitation there. There is some kind of finite levels there, because there are levels. Without levels, then everything is just pure, plain, clear, clean. When you start with levels, then you're saying that there are differences. One thing is here, the other thing is there. The lowest of those Sephirot, the lowest of those levels, is Malchut, usually translated as sovereignty or kingship. Sovereignty or kingship means that when a person is in full control, the king or the queen, you have the full sovereignty of your place, then you are a king. If you don't have full sovereignty, then you're nothing. So if Putin can come into your country and start eating away, then you don't have a proper country. You don't have, that's what the world is trying to tell Putin, and Putin's telling the world, excuse me, do you know what this means? Anyway, but sovereignty means that you're in full control. It's your sovereign land. It's your place. I'm trying to tell this to Bibi Netanyahu for the last 15 years. When you say that I can make two states, then you're saying I don't have sovereignty. It's not mine. Kingship means that's mine. If I want to give it to you, I'll think about it. But right now, it's mine, and I don't care what anyone says. It's my land. So, only when you come to the end of all of the levels can you say sovereignty. Can you say kingship? Now I've come to the point. So when we were driving from New York back home on last Monday, we left at about noon. We figured to get here about 1 in the morning. And then at about 5:30, it started to snow. We said, oh, that's fun. It looks nice and sweet. Then about a half hour later, it wasn't looking that nice. It was brown, and then we started slipping and sliding. And then it got dark, and then we started slipping and sliding more. And the trucks were just merrily rolling along. They're very heavy. They don't bother. There's 1 or 2 inches. My little car out there, that little thing was flying all over the place, especially when the trucks were coming and going. And it was quite clear that we are going to have to stop for the night, then, which is what we stopped in the middle of nowhere, Virginia. And we found a cheap place, and we parked ourselves in the thing. We had a good night's sleep, and it was very comfortable. We ate something, we played some games on the phone, and we davened a little bit, studied, we finished my day, and relaxed, and then we went to bed. We had a good. What else are you going to do? Nothing on the TV. There's no baseball game, so what are you going to do? There's no entertainment on TV. There is nothing on that stupid television. So after 5 minutes, that was turned off. We went and browsed some certain channels, and then Penina and Mrs. Lou and I went to bed. But that got us nowhere. The next day, I had to drive another 550 miles. So before I got home, I was not in control of anything. By the way, the highways were spotless, not just clean of snow, they were dry. And I can tell you something else, the trees were from the mid-South Carolina on the 85 all the way to about 30 miles from Atlanta. Beautiful, encrusted and encased with ice. It was silver all over the place. It looked beautiful, but thank God we don't live there. The trees were all down all over the place. You can see limbs are hanging, and the trees are all, you can see the trees are saying, I can't handle this much more. Just filled with ice. And all of this was beautiful. We were entertained, and we had a good night's sleep, and we saw beautiful snow, and we saw beautiful trees. All of that was nothing in comparison to coming home. Once you got home, you were in control. Now your trip had ended. Now you took your entertainment with you, your food with you, whatever you had, you came to the end. Now you're in control. Kingship, sovereignty. That's what it means. Malchut serves as a bridge between Atzilut, which is the highest world, and the lower worlds of Beriah, Yetzirah, and Asiya. Those are the Hebrew definitions of the next three worlds: creation, formation, and action. We are in the bottom of the world of action. We are absolutely on the bottom of the barrel. Transmitting to them, then this Malchut is that bridge that transmitting to them the godly energy that enlivens and animates them, that gives to the rest of the world all of its energy. So it allows, it's a conduit for the godly energy to go through and get into the next worlds. And each world has these 10 levels, and each level takes that energy and does something to it to allow it to get to the next energy, to the next level, until you get down to here, where you can have a world that doesn't even see God, obviously. It's a completely, so all this energy is coming from God. He's creating everything, and yet you can't see him or feel him. You got to go searching for him here. You got to look for him. He's not obvious, not apparent in all places. Thus, as the lowest level in Atzilut, or Malchus, it's considered as the land, like the earth, because that's the lowest form of all. Even on the bottom of water, you got land, you got earth. And its function as the source of life, which is what earth is, to the lower worlds gives it the name of land of life. To these lower worlds, then, Malchut is representative of the Shekhinah, of the divine presence, because the divine presence is designed to rest, to reside in this world. But you can't have the levels of the higher worlds into this world, because then the world will cease to function as it is. God wants this world, and he designed it this way, so it should not feel God in this world. And he wants us to uncover the godliness of the world. He gives us, human beings, Gentiles and Jews, the opportunity to uncover God. To Jews, it's following the commandments of the Torah. And to the non-Jews, it's their commandments and their mandates that are the 7 Noahide laws. So that's what it means, that tzedakah. Tzedakah gives us the godly energy that's on the bottom of that first world as it is there, without having to go through all the stops and stations in Virginia and in South Carolina. It gives us from New York the real bagels. So giving tzedakah connects us with the level of God before it became changed, so we can come to this world and be a source of life for even the ants out there, for everything, for the plants. That we have anyway. When we give tzedakah, we're skipping 3 worlds to get to the highest level of God that's possible for a person in this world to be able to get and to receive, and to become sanctified with. A taste of the divine. So that's what tzedakah. That's where tzedakah would elevate a person to that kind of level. That's what the Rebbe is writing in Tanya, and he continues in that sense. Now, whoever is enlightened as to this great and wondrous matter, whoever understands this point now, which he just made, will discover and appreciate how profound are the words of the sages of lesser memory when they said, everything is according to the preponderance of good deeds. This is a quote from the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, as we discussed last time. It's the part of the Talmud that is ethics, and it says in that part of the Talmud that everything follows the preponderance, the how many times we do the action. It doesn't say how big the action, but how often the action. This refers to the act of charity performed numerous times, thereby eliciting supernal life, life that comes from that level, to repeatedly cause a supernal unification of Kudsha Brichu and his Shekhinah. Kudsha Brichu is the remote level of God, and the Shekhinah is the level of God that's designed, the divine level designed for this world. And as a unification, that means that this divine level of coming to this world gets even a more stronger infusion of the infinite level of godliness. This unification. So every single time a person does tzedakah, a person gives tzedakah, every coin that is given is another repetition of this great infusion of divine energy into the level that's on its way to this world. So this is the spiritual advantage of giving tzedakah. From the Mishnah and the Rambam, as well as from the esoteric parts of the Torah, it is clearly evident that smaller, more frequent donations are superior to a single large contribution of the same amount. So he's established pretty clearly that giving $10,000 over a year is better than giving $10,000 one time in the year. And before we conclude, I want to reiterate what I said before. It's not so simple as that. It's not black and white as that, because sometimes when you're giving to a school, an institution, the school would prefer you give them once a day, because they can rely. Every day they have another thing, another crisis. So if 10 people gave them $1,000 a day, they got $10,000. They can use that. And instead of giving them $1 million, instead of getting 100,000 from 10 people once in a year, that $1 million will go very quickly. But if you're giving them $10,000 a day, or $1,000 a day, $10,000 total, then they will appreciate that more. There are other times where the institution needs it now because they need to pay the builders and they need to pay whatever. So then it does depend on the recipient as well. But if you're giving, it's what somebody asked me about. We had our charity event, and somebody says, I want to give you $2,000, but I'm studying over here. Somebody from our group here, they said, but we're studying that it's better to give every day than rather one lump sum. One lump sum. So I said, give me $1,900, and the other $100 distribute throughout the year. Oh, $100 that I'm doing anyway. So okay, then give me the two. We need it now. The money was needed then. If you're planning to give every single day, great. Then give 10 cents every day. That's fine for your $100 or whatever it might be. But there are certain lump sums that need to be given because of the recipient. It's like, I think I mentioned this story. Somebody came to the first Rebbe of Chabad and said, Rebbe, I'm a wealthy man, and I do give a lot. But it makes my ego is just inflated every time I give. Maybe I should start giving a little less. So the Rebbe smiled and he said, why don't you ask the poor man how much ego he cares about? You're giving the needy. Why don't you ask those who need if they worry about yours? Your ego is your problem. What the people are receiving, how can you stop that?